Is not that chat is not on. Okay, good morning and welcome to all of the people who are viewing this today. Um, so today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about the summary of our probability unit, and because of this, we're just gonna write all of the things that we learned about, starting from lesson one, which is introduction to probability, and all the way to odds and probability. So here we go. So when we talk about lesson one, we talked about intro to probability. Intro to probability. Okay, so what did we talk about in terms of intro to probability? So the first thing that we talked about was we defined what probability is. So we talked about probability. So probability refers to chance, the chance of an event happening. So, like, we hear that all the time, like the chance that it's going to be raining. What's the chance that I'm going to win? What's the chance of me um, um, passing? What's the chance of me being successful in this? So, we all talk about the chance or the probability of something is going to happen. So, that's a chance. And the thing about probability is that we can calculate it, we can express it in different ways. So I'll just write that down. Probability can be expressed as, okay, so we can express it as a fraction. I'll just write it in here. We can write it as a fraction. We can write it as a decimal. We can write it as a percent, or write it in words. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down an example of how we can express a fraction, probability as a fraction, a decimal percent, and in words, and then converting it. So all of these is in lesson number one. For example, we can go 35%. Okay, so if something is 35% chance that it's gonna, let's say it's gonna rain, 35% chance that it's gonna rain today, we can write that percent as a fraction, as a decimal, as in words. So how do we write all that stuff? Now, let's remember what percent means. Percent is ratio out of 100. So the word 35% means 35 out of 100. Okay, so 35 divided by 100. That's what 35% means. Okay, so we write, the very first thing we could do is write it as a fraction. Now that we have that, we can write 35% as a decimal. So when we write it as a decimal, we go 35 divided by 100. So 35, so this line means dividing, and we're dividing it by 100. So we're going to get a 0.35. So 0.35 Okay. And then we can write it finally in words. Well, 35%, we can write it in words. What is it out of? So 35 out of out of 100. Okay. So so in this particular case, we can write the probability as a percent, fraction, decimal, and in words. Okay. So that's what lesson one is, or part of the lesson one. Now, the other thing that we talked about in lesson one is uh, we talked about certain events, an impossible event, and we also talked about complementary event. So complementary of an event. Now, when we talked about complementary in an event, we looked at refers to the quantity that completes the whole thing. So this refers to the quantity of amount that completes something. Okay. Now we looked at that in different ways. So let's say I'll give another example. Let's say there is a 70% chance of winning. Well, 70%, that's not the whole thing. 70% is just a portion of that whole thing. So the complement would be the extra 30%, right? Because that makes it the whole 100%. So if it's 70% chance of winning, then the complement is 30%. Well, if there's 70% chance of winning, then the complement is 30% chance of losing or not winning. Okay. Let's see, I got one half, a half chance of getting the tail in a coin, tail in the a half chance of getting the tail when I toss the coin. So the complement, that's one half only. What's the whole thing? So complement is the other one half, because one half and a one half makes it one whole thing. So complement is one half of not the tail. Well, in that case, not tail is picking or getting the head from the toss of the coin or a flip of a coin. What else can we? Okay, so 0.01 chance of hitting a ball. Okay, so that's a really bad chance of hitting the ball. So if this is 0.01 chance of hitting the ball, what's the chance of not hitting the ball? So when we think about this one here, this is expressed as a decimal. So a decimal would be out of 1 would be the whole thing. So the complement is 1 minus 0.01, which is 0.99. So the complement would be 0.99. Okay, so that's the stuff that we talked about in lesson 1. So we talked about what it means by probability. And bring it down a bit. Oops. What it means by probability, ways to write the probabilities of fraction, decimal percent, and in words. And then we talked about complementary event. And then you probably know that the reason why we had to do complementary event will be used for the odds calculation. Another thing that we talked about in lesson number 1 is the difference between experimental probability and theoretical probability. So experimental versus theoretical. Okay. So what is the difference between experimental and theoretical probability? So experimental probability, this is based on past experiment of events. So in this particular case, we would have collected some data. So there are collected data, and it's because it's collected data, it's gonna be, so probability would be based on how many times something happened divided by the number of trials. So here the probability can be calculated by taking the following. So I'll just write it down. So the probability, experimental probability, is number of times event happened. That's past tense because it's already, we did the experiment. So how many times did it happen? Divided by the number of trials. So how many experiment did we do? How many times did we roll the die? Or how many times did we flip the coin? Or how many times did we draw from a bag of marbles or something? So those are the experimental probability. Now in theoretical probability, what's theoretical probability? Theoretical probability is looking, no experiment needed. What we need to do is we look at the possible outcomes. Okay, so in that particular case, we could figure out the possible outcomes, and this one talks about what should happen. So how can we calculate that? So can be calculated by taking this one, by taking number of in terms of the possible number of times an event can happen, divided by number of total possible outcomes. Okay, so I'll give us an example in this particular case. Okay, I'm going to put a box around this so that we know this is important. This is our what do you call it? Our formula. Okay, so how can we do that? Let's say we have in this bag candies, right? So this is our gum. So this is a red gum. This is green gum, blue, yellow. Okay, so we have this candies or gums in this bag. And if we say, what is the probability that I'm going to pick yellow? Yeah. P means probability. And then this is the event, picking the yellow, picking the Y. So I put my hand in the bag, jiggle it up, and then pull out something. And what's the chance of getting a yellow? Well, how many yellows are in the bag? Well, there's only one yellow in the bag, divided by how many all possible all of things inside. So it's 1/4, right? So this one tells you how many yellows. Oops. Y's. And then this tells you how many there are altogether. Okay, so that's basically it, right? We don't have to go through the whole experiment. We just look, it's like, okay, how many yellows are in here? Well, there's only one yellow, so one possibility out of how many are there altogether? 4. So it's 1 out of the 4 chance of getting the yellow. Okay, wow, there's quite a bit of stuff that we talked about in lesson 1. So let's go on and move to lesson number 2. So lesson number 2. And if you are just writing things down, don't you worry. You can jot some stuff down and then I will scan this and upload it onto our blog for today. Okay, so let's take a look at lesson number 2. So what's lesson number 2? We talked about applications of probability. So applications of probability. So in terms of lesson number 2, applications of probability is very connected to lesson 1 stuff, but in this particular case, in the applications, it's a whole bunch of like um, word problems rather than just calculation. So in that particular case, so it's very, very close to lesson 1 stuff, but the only thing that's a little bit different in this particular case, so I'll just put a little information in here, very similar to lesson 1, but more like word problems. Okay, so that's the only thing that's very different in terms of this one is that the calculation of expected value. Now, in terms of calculated expected value, this is not the one that we talked about down in lesson 3. So in terms of calculation expected value, we're actually talking about how many do we expect. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk about the example of this, and then we'll move on to lesson 3, and then we'll see expected value again. And it's like, oh, what's the difference? So calculation of the expected value. So let's take a look at the example. So let's say the probability that I that something is defective. Okay, I'll just pick something. Some toy is defective is 2 out of 500. Okay, so when 2 out of 500 toy is defective, we're like, that's pretty small chance that it's defective, right? So the question that comes to this is, if we make 2,000 toys, okay, if we make 2,000 toys, how many do we expect to be defective? Okay, so in that particular case, I'm just gonna see, well, we'll see how do we solve this. Now we know it's 2 out of 500 is defective. So 2 out of 500 is defective. So if we set it up like this, 2 out of 500, so it looks like the probability is expressed as a fraction. Remember, the 2 is defective. I'm just gonna, and then this is like all of them, all toys. So we're gonna equate that. We're gonna put an equal sign and equate it as, well, now if we have 2,000 toys, and this again, all toys that we've made, how many do we expect to be defective? So that's what we're trying to figure out. So how do we do that? Now, if we've taken the grade 11 essentials, and we've seen this before, and if you've taken it a long time ago, this is how we do it. So we cross multiply the 2,000. So it would become 2 out of 500 times 2,000. And that's equal to the x. Okay, so how do we do that? You can just, take 2, divide by 500. So 2 divided by 500. And then times by 2,000. And then the answer is 8. Okay, so we can expect in that batch of 2,000 toys, there could be 8 defectives. Okay, 8 defective toys. So that's basically it. Okay, now how do you visualize that? Okay, so this is, let's say, a batch of 500 toys, and we know 2 are defective. Those are not the, 2 are defective. So I'm just gonna circle the 2 that are defective. And then if I do another batch of 500, again, another batch of 500, and then every batch of 500, that's basically what this is saying, is that every batch of 500, there are 2 that are defective. So this is another batch of 500, so 2 are defective. And then I'm going to do another batch of 500 toys. And then there's another 2 that are defective right there. And then another batch of 500 toys. And there are another 2 that are defective. So if now altogether there's like 2,000, right? And then 2,000 toys that are made, batches of 500, and then how many are all together? There's 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 defectives. Okay, so house. That's basically what lesson 2 is, looking for expected value, but in terms of expected value, how many do we expect? Okay, how many? So let's jump into lesson number 3. And then this is another expected value. Okay, now you're thinking, oh, okay, well, we did expected value in lesson 2, then why is this another expected value in lesson 3? What's the difference? So expected value in this particular case is that in this particular case, we are looking for how much money are we going to gain. So expected value is how much do we gain, and sometimes it's not always gain or lose in certain situations. So how many are we gonna, or how much, this one here is how much are we gonna gain or are we gonna lose? So that talks about, and then there's a formula for this one. So when we look at our expected value, money gain or money loss, this is the formula. Okay, so here's a formula for expected value. Expected value, so EV, okay, that's an expected value of gain or loss, is equals to probability that we're going to win times how much money are we going to win, how much money won, minus the cost to play. Now, because this is all talking about the cost, this is we either gain or lose. So if it's a positive, then it's a positive expected value, then that's a gain for that, a gain. And then if it's like a negative, it's going to be a loss. Okay, so that's that piece. Let's take a look at some examples in here. So example, you bought a ticket for a raffle that costs, let's say $5. Okay, so you bought a ticket for a raffle that costs $5, and the chance to win is let's say 0.3. That's not a bad chance of winning. And if you win, you get $20. Okay, so you bought a ticket for a raffle, and it costs $5. If we win, the chance of winning is 0.3. Now, if you win, you get $20. So, what's the expected value? Okay, so we go probability of winning times how much am I going to win minus cost to play. And so what's the chance of winning? It's going to be 0.3 times how much am I going to win? I'm going to get $20 out of this thing. But because I had to pay $5 to get the ticket, so I got to subtract the $5. So you go 0.3 times 20, it's 6 minus 5. Okay, well, I just broke it up into two parts. So this part here is 6 and then minus 5. So that's, you're expected to gain a $1. So that's not a bad raffle for you. Okay, so that's one of the examples. Okay, I know that you can't ask questions, but at this particular time for our live stream, but if there's something in here that you're not sure of, just send me an email and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Okay, so we've done lesson 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to go 5 and 6. Sorry, 4 and 5, rather. And they're very connected to each other. They're very connected. So let's see here. Lesson 4. Okay. So we started talking about odds, and the odds is basically another way of looking at chances, looking at probability. But instead of looking at the whole thing or comparing it to the other whole thing, we are just looking for comparison. So odds is basically comparison, if we think of it that way. Okay, so when we look at that, odds, we either have odds in favor in terms of odds in favor, that's basically the ratio of the event is to the opposite. So odds in favor is number of success. Okay, and then this one here, the 2 dots, actually you would read that as is to. So that's a ratio. Number of not success. Okay, so if you watched the video that I posted last time on odds, you probably noticed that I wrote down event is to not, whatever not event is. Okay, so just looking at those two, because if we broke it up into like that, it's easier to see it. And then odds against. Okay, so what does odds against mean? means number of not success in the event that we're talking about, is to number of success. Okay, so again, let's take a look at an example. We'll do one example, and then here's an example. Again, I'm gonna have like a bag of, here, I got chocolate bars, chocolate bars, chocolate bars. Okay, so these ones are chocolate bars, and these ones are candies or gums. So here, chocolate bar, and then these ones are, let's say, candies. So the question might be is, what are the odds of picking chocolate? Okay, so these are the chocolates. So what are the odds of picking a chocolate? Now, because it's odds, and then this is your event that you go, number of success would be the chocolate bar is 2, number of not chocolate bar. Okay, I'm gonna make sure that I put the word not there. So number of chocolates. Okay, how many number of chocolates do we have in here? 1, 2, 3. So 3 is 2. How many is not chocolate? Not chocolate would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 is to 5. Okay. So something like that. So you have quite a bit of those questions on our book. Okay. And then let's take a look. I'm actually going to go back in here. It says number of successful events and not successful event. I'm just going to put event there. Okay, so we know what we're talking about. So event is something that's happening. Okay, so last but not the least, lesson 5. Lesson 5 is odds and probability. Odds and probability. Okay, so what did we talk about in terms of odds and probability? This one here is converting from odds to probability. The word odds is actually comparing number of parts. Parts is to parts. I'm just actually going to write that down. This is actually from our book. Part is to part. So the word part would be success or not success. Okay, so if we're talking about, and then probability is talking about part out of the total, the whole thing. Total outcomes. That means a whole. So we can convert Now, part plus part, that will give us the whole thing. Let's see here. Let's see an example in this particular case. Example. There are 4 green marbles, 6 blue, and then 5 yellow. Okay, so there are 4 greens, 6 blue, and 5 yellow. Here's a question. Odds of picking blue. So because we're talking about odds of picking a blue, we're going to take a look at odds of picking a blue. That would be, well, blue is to not blue. Okay, so if we state it this way, it would be easier to figure out our solution for odds. Okay, so this is my event is to not the event. So event that we're talking about is blue. So how many blues are there? 6 is to how many are not blue? Well, how many are not blue? Not blue would be 4 and 5. So that gives us 9. So 6 is to 9. Well, that's the odds. What about probability? So the probability would be of picking blue. Well, how many are there? Probability of blue, that's going to be 6 divided by, if you have just the odds and not all these contexts, then we're going to add these two up, part and part. That makes it the whole thing. So 6 plus 9 will give you 6 out of 15. And then whatever that is in our decimal, so 6, and that's going to be 0.4. 6 divided by 15, 0.4. Okay, so that's odds and probability. Let's take a look at the last example. The probability of the probability of us going back to school in June. Okay, I'll just make it up. Okay, I don't know if this is true. So the probability of us going back to school in June is 0.1. Okay, so 0.1. Okay, what is the odds of us going back in June? Okay, so we know it's 0.1 is our, because this is a probability, that's our chance. That's our chance. We can think of it as 0.1 times 100 to make it a percent. Okay, so we can see that. If you want, you could go 0.1 times 100. That's going to give us 10. So that means it's 10 out of 100 chance of us going to school. Okay, So 10 is the event going back to school, and then this is all together. So this is go back to school, and then this one here is like all of the chances all together. Okay, so if we do the odds, it's gonna be odds of going back in June. So go back is to not go back. Okay, so going back is 10. Now, if this is all of the possibilities, then that means it's going to be just 90 of not going back. So there's going to be 10 is to 90 of odds of going back to school in June. Okay, like I said, I just made it up. Okay, so uh, it's just for as an example. Okay, so there you have it. We've talked about all of our lessons 1 through 5 in terms of probability. So my hope for us today and is for us to um, take a look at those questions, get us some time to work on some of these Unit 6 unit review. This is on your booklet. So go and take a look at these questions. This is a nice variety of questions for us to do. And it has everything from probability to expected value to odds and probability. So give those questions a try. And a reminder again that our test on this particular unit is on Thursday. Okay, so Thursday, May 7th. So thank you very much for staying on track. I know some people are working so hard and continuing on their studies. I just want to let you know that we have about 5 more weeks to go of school, and I know we can do it. And just hang in there, and we're gonna get through this course very successfully. Just keep on doing your part, and I'm gonna be keeping on doing my part as your teacher. Okay, so thank you very much for participating in today. And again, send me an email because I disabled my live chat. Send me an email if you have any questions or concerns, or if you want to do Google Meet. Let me know, and then we can set up an appointment for that. Okay, well, have a great day, everyone, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Okay, bye for now.